that throughout his career, he's the one who is sort of not the smartest of the founders of the United States. I mean, there's Madison and Jefferson and all sorts of geniuses. He's not even the most passionate. You have John Adams, Sam Adams, and he's not sort of this towering figure of rectitude like George Washington. But he, in my mind, is the most important of all. He's the one who can bring them together. And even to give an example, at the Continental Congress, where they're doing the Declaration to try to explain why we're having a revolt against England. And by the way, you know, he traveled up here, right around to Waterloo, Toronto area, to try, alas, not successfully, to get you all in on this. But he writes a declaration that's aimed at Canada, aimed at France, aimed at the other places that might ally in the fight against England. The Declaration of Independence that says, you know, that we have to be candid to a world to explain why we're doing it. And it's Jefferson who gets to write the first draft. And he writes this wonderful sentence. And the way he begins is this: we hold these truths to be sacred. And you see the committee, because Congress had created a committee, probably the last time Congress created a good committee, but it had Jefferson, Franklin, and John Adams on it. You see Franklin crossing out sacred and writing self-evident, saying we're trying to create a new type of nation that's based on rationality and reason, not on the dictates and dogma of a particular religion. Then you see Adams write in where Jefferson put it, endowed with certain inalienable rights by the creator with certain inalienable rights. So even in the collaboration on half of a sentence, you can see how they were doing the compromise between, you know, the belief in divine providence versus the belief in rationality, rights, and reason, and to bring us together in that way. You know, it was frightening to me. I was at CNN, perhaps you were there, on the one morning when I was writing about this. And I mean, I'd written, you know, I was working on it the night before, come into the meeting at CNN Center in Atlanta at 7 in the morning. Somebody says, oh, we got a good crossfire. That was a show we did for tonight. We have a judge in Alabama that's put the 10 Commandments on the steps of his courthouse, and a federal judge has ordered them to remove it, and he won't. They're going to send in the marshals. And everybody said, oh, good, a crossfire. We'll get who's for the 10 Commandments, who's against the 10 Commandments. I said, great. And then I thought, wow. Here, I'm thinking about the founders who have used religion in a very careful way to bind us together. And now our media, our politicians, journalists, everybody else, is just using the 10 Commandments as a wedge issue to pull us apart. So to me, that's sort of one of the other lessons. It's something you can have here in this area where you have such a diverse and global population and citizenry that the whole point of things is bringing people together and being inclusive, because that's what creates the creativity. All of this brew, I think, is sort of the importance of imagination and creativity. But there's one other ingredient, and that gets back to what I think humans do better, at least for this century, than machines do, which is be creative, think out of the box, break the rules, question the instructions. Albert Einstein, another of my subjects, once said a wonderful line that I did not first understand when I read it in his letter to his son, but it was, imagination is more important than knowledge. I'm thinking, well, you know, made by Einstein, you know, he's a man of huge knowledge, what does he mean by that? But Einstein, just like Leonardo or whatever, or many others, was always questioning received wisdom. Leonardo da Vinci did it because, having been born out of wedlock, he was not allowed to study Latin or go to one of the elite universities then in the late 1400s. So he resents those who have received wisdom, and he always says, experiment and experience will be my guide. Likewise, though, with Einstein. Einstein was somebody who was always thinking out of the box, and he was always doing it by thinking visually, as opposed, you know, to sort of a logical sequencing, the way an algorithm would do it. He would visualize it. When he was a kid, his father gave him a compass. And he was mesmerized about why the compass needle kept twitching and pointing north. And, you know, you and I probably remember getting a compass when we were kids, right? You go, oh, well, look, the needle, it points north. Nothing's touching it. I wonder and then we're a minute later, oh, look, you know, a dead squirrel or whatever. We're on to something else. His entire life, Einstein's still puzzling a bit on what's a force field? How does a force field interact with a particle? You know, what's making that needle twitch and point north? And so he begins to sort of study electromagnetism, things like that. And at age 17, he's looking at Maxwell's equations. And if you look at Maxwell's equations, or if you're Einstein, you look at them, they tell you that an electromagnetic wave, a light wave or whatever, travels at the same speed. No matter how fast you're moving towards it or away from it, the electromagnetic wave has always got to travel at the constant speed of light. And Einstein said, yeah, but what if he's picturing, what if I caught up with the wave? Wouldn't it look stationary to me? But Maxwell's equations don't allow for that. He said it caused him such angst that his palms began to sweat. I know what was causing my palms to sweat at age 17. It wasn't Maxwell's equations. But, you know, this guy is still trying to visualize. So he can't, you know, he finally gets into, on the second try, the Zurich Polytech, but he can't get his doctoral degree because they keep rejecting his, you know, they can't. So he's a third-class clerk in the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. And he's looking at devices to synchronize clocks, because the Swiss had just gone on standard time zones. And the Swiss people, anybody here know a Swiss person, you'll affirm this, they tend to be really Swiss. They care that if it strikes the hour at Bern, that at the exact same instant, it'll strike the hour in Zurich or Basel or wherever. And the only way to do that is to have a device that synchronizes the clocks. The device sends out a signal. The signal travels at the speed of light. You got a patent clerk saying, yeah, but what if I caught up with it? What if I'm riding alongside? And he realizes that if he's riding alongside one of the light waves or signals towards one of the clocks, what looks synchronized will be different than if he's riding in the other direction. And from that, he just makes a mental leap that, oh, I get it. The speed of light is always constant, but time is relative depending on your state of motion. Now, if you don't get that right away, don't worry. He still couldn't get his doctorate for a while. He was still at the patent office 3 years later because he couldn't get a job teaching. But eventually, that becomes a special theory of relativity. And it just comes from questioning the received wisdom, which was Newton, in his very first paragraph in the Principia, saying, time marches along second by second, irrespective of how we observe it. And you have this guy thinking out of the box, thinking creatively, and saying, how would you know that? How could you test it? And all the other great, more knowledgeable physicists of the era had just taken that as a given. I'll end by saying all of these characteristics stick through life. You know, at the very end of his life, Einstein, on his deathbed in Princeton, having had an aneurysm that burst, decided not to have an operation. He asked for his papers to be brought to him. And what turned out to be his last night, after the visitors leave, 9 o'clock, he takes out the papers by his bedside. He's just writing line after line of equations. 9 pages, and you see him start making math mistakes, correcting them, dribble off at the end when it gets too painful, till it finally dribbles off, till he does one last line of equations that he thought would get him and the rest of us a step closer to the spirit manifesting the laws of the universe. And those equations were simply, how can you get a unified field theory, a theory that connects, you know, the field theory of electromagnetism with gravity, with particles, or to put it more simply, why does the compass needle twitch and point north? And as for Steve Jobs, it was in August of 2011 when it was clear he wasn't going to outrun the cancer. I was out there in Palo Alto with him, and I said, you know, what do you think the legacy is? What's the real meaning of everything you've done? He said, well, I used to think, because I believe, since my Zen Buddhist training, that history is like the flow of a river, your life is like a flow. That if you had a very successful life, there were things people would put into that river. Great ideas, great products, great devices, wonderful things they'd manufactured. And if you were successful, you got to take many things out of that river and enjoy them. But he said, now I realize that it's not how much you take out of the river, it's what you get to put into the river. And that's what caused my passion for always trying to create products of great beauty that people would someday be still playing with and say, hey, that's cool. Somebody put that in the river for me. And that's what Benjamin Franklin, at the Constitutional Convention, he's the one who comes up with this notion of a compromise between the big states and the little states, when they were trying to form the United States. He said, when we were young tradesmen here in Philadelphia, we'd take a little, if we had a joint of wood, it didn't fit together, you'd take a little from one side, you'd shave from the other, you had a joint that would hold together for centuries. And so too, we here, because each part was some of our demands. His point was that compromises may not make great heroes, but they do make great democracies. They do make great corporations. And during his lifetime, he contributed to the building fund of each and every church that was built in Philadelphia. And at one point, they were building a new hall next to Independence Hall that was for visiting preachers, and he wrote the fundraising document. He said, even if the Mufti of Constantinople were to send somebody here to preach Islam to us, we should offer a pulpit and listen, for we might learn. On his deathbed, he was the largest contributor to the Mikveh Israel Synagogue, the first synagogue in Philadelphia. And so when he died, instead of his minister accompanying his casket to the grave, all 35 ministers, preachers, and priests of Philadelphia linked arms with the rabbi of the Jews and marched with him to the grave. It's that type of spirit of working together, of teamwork, of collaboration, of respecting everybody that they were fighting for back then, and we're still fighting for both here and around the world today. Thank you all.
They would keep going, but they're being polite. They're Canadians. We've got a lot of questions on the app. I'm going to start with one that I like.